If you own a multi-unit rental property in Washington, D.C., there are 3 dates that quietly control how much money your building makes in 2026. November 29th. Most landlords already missed this one. That was the RAD rent registry compliance deadline. March 1st, the real deadline for serving rent increases under the 60-day notice law. And May 1st, when the new rent control year and new inflation caps begin. Miss any one of this and the CD doesn't see it as a mistake. They see it as a non-compliance. And the biggest risk right now isn't inflation or politics. It's landlords thinking they're exempt when RAD system says they're not. DC multi-unit landlords make the same assumption over and over. I am in an LLC, I only have 4 units, I am exempt. Wrong. TOPA exemptions and rent control exemptions are 2 completely different things. You can be exempt from TOPA and still fully subject to rent control. DC's small landlord rent control exemption is narrow. It applies only to the natural persons, not entities, and only when properly claimed and approved. If your building is owned by an LLC, partnership, trust, or a corporation, RAD generally treats it as a rent control by default, unless an exemption is formally on record. Which brings us to the bigger issue, and this is where the November deadline matters. In 2025, DC ruled out strict enforcement of rent registry. Every rental unit, exempt or not, must be registered and kept current. The compliance deadline was November 29th. A lot of multi-unit landlords missed it. Not because they didn't care, because they assumed all the registrations, all the exemptions, or prior filings were enough. They were not. If your units aren't properly registered right now, RAD defaults them to rent control status. That affects whether an exemption is recognized, whether a rent increase is valid, whether a tenant can challenge past increases. So when landlords ask me, can I raise rents on May 1st? The real question is, what does RAD system say about your building today? If the registry isn't clean, everything else falls apart. Even if you qualify for small landlord exemption, it doesn't exist unless it's filed and approved. RAD Form 1 is how you register units and formally claim exemptions. No filing, no certificate. No certificate, no exemption, no matter how obvious you think it is. I have seen multi-unit landlords lose rent increase disputes, not because the law was against them, but because the paperwork was missing or outdated. And once a tenant files a petition, the burden is on you to prove compliance. This is why the registry deadline and exemption filing go hand in hand. One without the other doesn't protect you. For rent-controlled units, 2026 increase will again be based on CPI-W plus 2%, subject to caps. Inflation is cooling. That likely means a mid-4% allowable increase. But here's what multi-unit owners need to understand. DC doesn't let you bank increases. If you don't take the lawful increase this year, you lose it forever across multiple units. That permanently lowers the income trajectory of the building, which is why execution, not theory, matters. The law now requires 60 calendar days written notice for rent increases. That means no increased rent on May 1st, 2026. Notice must be properly served no later than March 1st, 2026. Not mailed late, not emailed casually, not based on all these templates. For rent-controlled units, you must use RAD Form 8 and follow the RAD's filing process. If you manage multiple units, one mistake multiplies fast. For some DC multi-unit landlords, CPI increase doesn't cover reality. The law does allow hardship petition when a building isn't earning the minimum 12% return. They take time, they require clean numbers, but for small apartment buildings under pressure, they're often the only legal option. Here's the reality for DC multi-unit landlords. If you miss the November 29th rent registry deadline, you need to fix that. If you miss March 1st, you lose the 2026 increase. If your exemption isn't documented, it doesn't exist. This is why I ran a private Facebook group exclusively for DC multi-unit landlords. I just uploaded the 2026 rent increase checklist to the group's file. It lists the exact mailing dates so you never miss a deadline again. If you own a multi-unit property in DC and want that checklist, the link to join is in the description. Don't let this deadline sneak up on you again.